Let's start with the word invasive, because it means different things to different people. In a world shaped by colonization, deforestation, and climate chaos, the line between native and invasive is more complicated than we often like to admit. Some of these plants hitched rides with colonizers. Others spread when ecosystems were damaged. And some are adapting to rapid climate change, which, yes, is also on us. But here's the thing. These plants are here. They're thriving, and many of them aren't just edible, they're abundant, nutrient-dense, and wildly underused. Some of these plants may indeed harm native ecosystems, but far less than we humans have, through deforestation, pollution, and climate change. Their adaptation to these changing conditions may ultimately prove beneficial for both nature and the survival of our species. So instead of trying to poison, mow, or ignore them, let's get to know them, because in many cases the effort to control these plants has done more ecological harm than simply learning to harvest them. That said, here are 7 invasive plants you should be eating but probably aren't. This delicious flowering vine sprawls over fences, strangles saplings, and takes over forest edges. Japanese honeysuckle, or just honeysuckle to those who know it, is one of the most aggressive vines in the eastern U.S., but it's also sweet, fragrant, and surprisingly useful. Native to East Asia, not just Japan, Japanese honeysuckle was introduced to the U.S. in the early 1800s as an ornamental, back when Western gardeners were obsessed with the so-called exotic East. It didn't take long to escape cultivation, and today it's a dominant invader across the South and East, especially in disturbed forest and along roadsides. For generations, it's been a favorite wild edible among children, a summer ritual of gently picking the blossoms and savoring the single drop of nectar inside. The nectar is a wild source of quick calories and carbohydrates, and the flowers can be made into syrups, jellies, oxymels, herbal teas, infused vinegars, even frozen into popsicles or stirred into cocktails with gin or light rum. You probably don't remember that from your childhood. Although the flowers, and especially the nectar, are edible, never eat the berries. They're unlikely to be fatal, but they can cause some serious gastrointestinal distress. If that happens, you might want to check out 7 wild edible plants to soothe your stomach and heal your gut. Links in the description. Canary grass is a tall, aggressive grass that takes over wetlands, ditches, and disturbed soils across much of North America. Native to parts of Europe, Asia, and North America, some strains were introduced for erosion control and forage, but these often crowd out native plants. The seeds are edible, though harvesting and processing takes some patience. Once cleaned, they can be ground into flour for breads or porridge. It's a humble but valuable wild grain. Related to wheat, barley, and rye, reed canary grass offers a wild alternative to these staples. Its sturdy stems have also been used by indigenous peoples for basketry and weaving, perfect for making baskets to collect wild food. While you probably won't be flipping pancakes with it tomorrow, reed canary grass is a promising, underutilized resource, especially as we look for climate-resilient foods. It's unlikely to become a regular diet staple, but it's a wild grain and useful material worth knowing. A wild vine that climbs fences, blankets shrubs, and topples small trees along riverbanks and wetlands across much of North America. While technically native, not invasive, Riverbank Grape often acts like one, spreading fast and taking over disturbed areas with a wild energy few plants can match. The clips you're seeing here are vines growing right on my fences, an abundant local resource most people overlook. Its small, tart blue-black grapes aren't just for wildlife, they make excellent wild jelly, juice, and even a homemade wine or vinegar. The young leaves are edible and can be used as wraps. Think of them like grape leaves and dolmas, stuffed with rice, beans, or veggies, or simply steamed and served with a squeeze of lemon. Abundant and hardy, Riverbank Grape is a powerful example of native abundance that often gets overlooked, perfect for anyone interested in wild foraging and reclaiming local food systems. Often dismissed as a cheerful roadside flower, Oxeye Daisy is much more than a pretty face. Native to Europe and parts of Asia, it was introduced in North America in the late 1800s as a garden ornamental and for use in wildflower mixes and pasture improvements. Since then, it's spread aggressively in meadows, fields, and roadsides throughout the continent, crowding out native plants and altering habitats. The name Oxeye likely comes from the flower's large, round, bright face, reminiscent of a wide-open eye. But Oxeye Daisy offers edible petals, buds, and even roots. The young flower buds can be pickled like capers, adding a tangy floral burst to salads or snacks. The petals make a beautiful and mild addition to salads, teas, or garnishes. The roots, when young, can be cooked and eaten like other fruit vegetables. Before we move on, let's pause for a moment and think about why so many of these plants showed up in the early 1800s. This was a time of rapid change in America. Railroads crisscrossing the continent, farms expanding, towns popping up overnight. All that digging and building tore up the land, creating perfect conditions for opportunistic plants to take root. Seeds hitched rides and train ballast, soil and nursery shipments, traveling without our knowledge. What would become today's suburbs started as roads, farms, and tiny settlements, fragmenting native habitats and giving these newcomers space to spread. And then there was hubris, like the planting of kudzu throughout the southeast to control erosion. It worked a little too well. Now it's one of the most notorious invasive plants in the country, smothering forests and everything else in its path. Some of these species are so entangled with us that they go wherever we go, like dandelion, which now grows on every continent except Antarctica. Though, with the way things are warming, that might not last much longer. Anyway, moving on. A shade-loving biennial, garlic mustard, and mustards in general, has invaded forest and shaded edges across much of North America. Originally from Europe, it was introduced in the 1800s as a culinary herb, but quickly spread beyond gardens, outcompeting native wildflowers and altering soil chemistry. The entire plant is edible. Young leaves have a sharp, garlicky flavor, perfect for salads, pestos, and sautéing like spinach. The roots can be used like horseradish, and the flowers add a mild mustard note to dishes. Garlic mustard is a classic example of a plant that's both a problem and a resource. Instead of fighting it, harvesting and eating garlic mustard helps control its spread and puts a flavorful wild green on your table. It's rich in vitamins A and C, packed with antioxidants, and contains compounds that support digestion and immune health. Because it's so invasive, it's best to pull up the entire plant whenever possible, including the roots, to prevent it from spreading further. Don't worry, there's more of them than there are of us. A bamboo-like perennial invading roadsides, riverbanks, and disturbed soils across much of North America, Japanese knotweed was introduced from Asia in the late 1800s as an ornamental and erosion control plant like kudzu. It spreads aggressively and is notoriously hard to eradicate due to its deep, resilient rhizome system. Small root fragments can regrow with roots reaching over 10 feet deep and 20 feet wide. Cutting it back often only makes it stronger. This tenacity makes it one of the most hated invasive plants, but also one of the most overlooked wild edibles. Young shoots, harvested in early spring, can be peeled and cooked like asparagus. They have a tart, lemony flavor, perfect for pies, jams, or fresh veggies. Related to buckwheat, not bamboo, Japanese knotweed is packed with vitamin C and antioxidants, offering a nutrient-rich wild alternative to cultivated veggies. Just be sure to harvest sustainably and avoid spreading it further. Hairy bittercress pops up in early spring, flourishing in garden beds, sidewalk cracks, and disturbed soils. It's a small plant with delicate white flowers and rounded leaflets, but don't underestimate it. This mustard family weed is spicy, peppery, and surprisingly delicious. It gets its name from the tiny, fine hairs that covers its stems and leaves, giving it a slightly fuzzy texture. Hairy bittercress is a native to Europe and parts of Asia, and it likely made its way to North America in the late 1800s to early 1900s, probably as a contaminant in nursery stock or soil used in ornamental plant shipments. The entire plant is edible. The young leaves pack a punch like arugula or watercress and are perfect in sandwiches, salads, or pestos. The stems and flowers are tender enough to eat raw, and the seed pods add a crunchy zing when sprinkled on dishes. It's also loaded with vitamins A and C, along with minerals that support immune health. Because it grows during cooler months when other greens are scarce, it's a welcome burst of nutrition in early spring. Like other mustards, hairy bittercress is easy to pull and quick to reseed, so the more you harvest, the better. It's one of the best edible weeds you've probably yanked from your garden without second thought. Did you know broccoli, cauliflower, kale, cabbage, Brussels sprouts, and collard greens are all cultivated cousins of the same wild plant, wild mustard? Through selective breeding over centuries, humans took different parts of the plant and emphasized them. Want bigger leaves? You got kale and collards. A tighter flower head? Hello, broccoli and cauliflower. Leaf buds? Brussels sprouts. And wild mustards still offer those same nutritional benefits today, packed with vitamins, minerals, and a sharp, peppery bite. Unlike their cultivated cousins like broccoli and cauliflower, they didn't get the flavor bred out of them. So next time someone calls a plant a nuisance weed, maybe look a little closer. These so-called invaders might just be dinner. Wild plants aren't just resilient, they're rebellious, generous, and rooted in the same landscape we are. Some came here with us, some came here in spite of us, but they're here now, flourishing in the cracks, waiting to be noticed. If this resonates with you, if you believe food should be plentiful, wild, and free, join me in learning to see abundance where others see weeds. Like, subscribe, and share your knowledge. Together, we can change the way we relate to the land and to each other. Eat the weeds.